My husband had been dead for 7 days when I got the hotel bill with his name on it. That one line has haunted me ever since. It was a dull Tuesday morning in Maple Creek, Ohio, the kind where the air smells like wet leaves and the coffee tastes like ashes. I sat at my kitchen table, still wearing Mark's old plaid robe, staring at the empty chair across from me. Then I saw it, a plain white envelope shoved halfway under the front door, stamped Grandwood Inn. I almost tossed it in the pile of sympathy cards until I noticed the bold letters, billing notice, room 307. Inside was a printed invoice, Mark Morrison. 3 nights, $1,274.56, paid in full. My breath caught when I saw the payment line. Card holder, Melissa Morrison. Melissa, my daughter-in-law. At first, I thought the grief was making me see things wrong, but there it was, black and white. The check-in date 2 days before Mark's car accident. A chill ran down my spine. I dialed Melissa's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sugar-sweet, like she was rehearsing. "Hi, Mom, Elaine. How are you holding up, Melissa?" I said slowly. "Why is your name on a hotel bill with Mark's?" There was silence long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Then she said, calm and careful, "You must be mistaken. Maybe it's the grief. It makes people imagine things." "Melissa," I pressed. "I'm looking right at it." A faint sigh. "Elaine, please. You shouldn't dig into things that'll only hurt you more." Then click. She hung up. I froze, phone still in my hand, pulse hammering in my ears. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mark's old red pickup in the driveway, the same truck the police had returned after the wreck. The driver's side door was caved in like crushed tin. His coffee thermos still sat in the cup holder, the one I'd washed for him every morning for 40 years. I whispered to the empty room, "What were you doing at that hotel, Mark?" No answer. Only the ticking clock and the distant whine of the wind chime outside. But I felt something shift, the way the air changes right before lightning strikes. Because now I knew this wasn't over. My husband's death wasn't some tragic accident, and that envelope wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a message, maybe even a warning. The day of Mark's funeral felt like something out of a dream, the kind you want to wake up from but can't. The church was filled with the smell of lilies and rain-soaked coats. People whispered in soft voices, shaking my hand, saying things like, "He's in a better place now," or "At least he didn't suffer." I nodded, smiled, said thank you, but inside I couldn't feel anything. It was like my body was there, but my mind was floating somewhere else, somewhere between disbelief and dread. Mark had been my husband for 43 years. We met at a diner in Cleveland when we were 22. He spilled coffee on my blouse and bought me pie to make up for it. That's the kind of man. He was kind, clumsy, always apologizing. And now, gone. When they lowered the casket, I felt my knees give. My son David grabbed my arm, but his grip was stiff, distracted. He wasn't crying. Neither was Melissa. She stood behind him, black dress, perfect makeup, flawless eyes dry as stone. After the service, she put a hand on my shoulder. "You did so well, Mom." "Elaine," she said, "you held it together." Her words made me flinch. Held it together, like it was a performance. When we got back to the house, neighbors brought casseroles and pies, the usual Midwest kindness that never really reaches the heart. David sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Melissa busied herself in the kitchen, whispering with someone on her cell. I caught fragments insurance. Claim number, transfer next week. I froze. Insurance. Mark's life insurance policy, $2.5 million. When I walked in, she smiled too brightly. "Oh, just sorting some things for David," she said. "Paperwork. You don't have to worry." Her tone was smooth, but her eyes were sharp. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, too hollow, without Mark's soft snore from the other side of the bed. I wandered into his study, the one he used for his engineering blueprints, and sat in his chair. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered on the armrest. On the desk lay his pocket watch, stopped at 10:47, the exact time of the accident. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. Was it coincidence or something more I picked up? The watch felt the chill of the metal. For the first time since the funeral, tears came hot, fast, unstoppable. Then through the open window, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Melissa's voice outside, hushed but clear. "He'll never find out. She's too old to dig that deep." And David's reply, quiet, almost regretful. "I hope you're right." The days after the funeral crawled by like slow, heavy hours you could feel pressing on your chest. I tried to keep busy washing Mark's clothes, cleaning the porch, answering calls from church friends, but grief has a way of seeping into everything. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded lonely. David came by every few days, always in a hurry, always distracted. He'd stand in the doorway, tapping his car keys. "You doing okay, Mom?" he'd ask. I'd nod. He'd glance at his watch. "Good. Melissa's got a lot going on at work, but we'll check in soon." Then he'd leave before I could even offer him coffee. Melissa, though, called often, too often. Her voice was sweet, but cold, like ice wrapped in sugar. "You know, Elaine, it might be smart to start sorting Mark's things," she'd say. "We don't want the house feeling stuck in the past." The past. She said it like a disease. When I told her I wasn't ready, she sighed softly, like she was dealing with a child. "I understand, but closure is important. For all of us. Closure for her, maybe." Later that week, I went through Mark's desk to find the title for his truck. As I flipped through folders, I noticed one labeled Insurance, Beneficiary Update. Inside, there was a recent document signed just a month before he died. My name was still listed, but a sticky note was attached in Mark's handwriting, "Need to confirm with David and Melissa." Why would he need to confirm with them? It wasn't their policy. I felt something twist in my stomach. That evening, I invited them both over for dinner, hoping maybe to talk openly. I made Mark's favorite pot roast with mashed potatoes, carrots glazed in brown sugar. I wanted warmth, some sense of family. When they arrived, Melissa looked around like she was inspecting a crime scene. "You really should think about repainting, Elaine," she said lightly. "Something brighter. It's gloomy." I smiled tightly. Grief tends to dull the colors. She didn't laugh. Dinner was tense. David barely spoke. When I asked him about the insurance papers, he froze fork halfway to his mouth. Melissa jumped in before he could answer. "Don't worry, we're helping take care of everything. David's handling the claim. You don't need the stress." "I'm his wife," I said quietly. "If there's stress, it's mine to handle." Her eyes met mine, steady and unblinking. "Sometimes, Elaine, letting go is the kindest thing you can do." The silence after that was louder than thunder. When they left, I stood by the window watching their taillights disappear into the dark. My hands trembled not from sadness this time, but from something sharper, a suspicion I could no longer ignore. Because I finally realized my family wasn't grieving with me. They were planning around me. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, the sky outside still bruised and gray. The house felt colder than usual, as if Mark had taken the warmth with him. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam curling up into nothing. That's when I saw it, Melissa's SUV parked in the driveway. I hadn't invited her. A minute later, she walked in without knocking, holding a folder and wearing that polite little smile that made my stomach twist. "Morning, Elaine. I hope I didn't wake you. David's at work, so I thought I'd help you sort through some of Mark's papers." She didn't wait for permission. She walked straight into the study, heels clicking across the hardwood floor like a metronome of control. I followed, trying to stay calm. "Melissa, I appreciate your help, but I can manage my husband's affairs myself." She looked up from the desk, lips curved in that same artificial kindness. "Of course, I just thought you might be overwhelmed. You know, sometimes it's better to let the younger ones handle the complicated stuff." The younger ones? She said it like I was a relic. I watched as she started opening drawers, flipping through Mark's files as if they were hers. Insurance papers, tax forms, even his private notes. Nothing was off limits. Then she found something that made her pause, a small black envelope sealed with my name written on it in Mark's handwriting. "Oh," she said lightly, "this must be old." Before I could react, she slipped it halfway under a pile of folders, almost like she didn't want me to notice. I reached over and took it before she could stop me. "I'll take that." Her smile faltered for the first time. "Of course. just trying to help. But her eyes said something else entirely. After she left the house, went silent again, but my pulse was still pounding. I sat at the desk and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Mark's handwriting dated 1 week before he died. Elaine, if anything happens to me, check the folder in the attic. Don't trust anyone until you do. The attic. I read the line 3 times before it sank in. Outside, I heard Melissa's car door slam and the engine start. Through the window, I watched her drive off, and for a split second, I could swear she looked back toward the house. Not with worry, not with sadness, but with calculation. My hands trembled as I folded the letter back into the envelope. For the first time since Mark's death, my grief turned into something else entirely: suspicion, sharp and cold. If Mark had left me a warning, it meant one thing: he knew he was in danger. And if Melissa had tried to hide that letter, then maybe she knew too. I hadn't stepped into the attic in years. Mark used to call it his second office, the place where he kept old blueprints, toolboxes, and memories too dusty to face. But that morning, after finding his note, I stood at the base of the attic ladder, heart pounding like a drum inside a coffin. The house was quiet, almost listening. Outside, rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. I climbed the narrow steps, the wood creaking under my weight, each groan of the floorboards echoing louder than the last. The smell hit me first. It is cedar, dust, and motor oil. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly. I pulled the cord, and the light flickered to life, throwing long shadows across cardboard boxes labeled Christmas David, High School, and Mark's Projects. I scanned the room until I saw it a faded manila folder wedged between 2 old tool cases. On the cover, in Mark's neat handwriting, were the words, Grand Wood Inn. July bookings, confidential. My stomach dropped. I sat on a crate and opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were several printed receipts from the same hotel, all from the past 6 months. Each one had different names: M. Morrison, D. Carter, private booking cash payment. But what made my skin crawl was the last page, a photograph. It was blurry, clearly taken from a distance. But even in the grainy image, I could see Mark standing beside a woman outside the Grand Wood Inn. Her blonde hair caught the sun. Her hand rested on his shoulder. Melissa. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to believe it wasn't her, that my mind was playing tricks, that maybe it was some client, a business partner. But deep down, I knew. My son's wife, the same woman who told me to let go, had been meeting my husband at a hotel before he died. I pressed the photo against my chest and let out a sound I didn't recognize, half sob, half growl. Then something else slipped out of the folder, a small handwritten note from Mark Frank Knows. Ask him about room 307. Frank. Our old neighbor, retired cop. He'd moved 3 houses down last year after his wife passed. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to his place folder, clutched to my chest like a shield. The rain had turned into a storm, now pelting the windshield, as if the sky itself wanted to stop me. Frank opened the door wearing a worn flannel shirt, his gray hair sticking up in all directions. When he saw me, his expression changed from surprise to concern. Elaine, you look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, I whispered, handing him the folder. He flipped through the papers, jaw tightening with each page. I remember Mark mentioning that place, said he was working on some private consulting job. But this, he pointed at the photo, this doesn't look like business. No, I said quietly, it looks like betrayal. He frowned. You sure that's Melissa? I hesitated. I wish I wasn't. Frank sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I can call someone I trust, an old buddy who still works downtown. Maybe get access to surveillance from the hotel, see who checked in under those names. My hand shook. You can do that. He nodded. I'll try. But Elaine, if what you think is true, this goes way deeper than an affair. I stared at him, rain dripping from my hair, the photo still burning in my palm. Then I want to know how deep. If you found proof, your husband met your daughter-in-law in secret, and a note telling you to trust no one, would you stop there, or would you follow the trail? No matter where it led, that night I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled somewhere far away, echoing through the empty house like footsteps in the attic. I sat in Mark's old recliner, the folder on my lap, staring at the photo of him and Melissa until my eyes burned. Every time I blinked, I saw her hand on his shoulder, that smug little smile she wore when she thought no one was looking. I wanted to believe Mark was innocent, that there was some explanation, some twisted misunderstanding, but the pieces didn't fit. The hotel receipts, the secrecy, the accident, and now Frank's worried eyes when he said, "This goes deeper than an affair." At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. "Got something. Meet me at my place in the morning. Don't tell anyone." My pulse quickened. When I got there, Frank had a laptop open on the table, a mug of black coffee beside him. The screen showed grainy footage from a hotel security camera. He pressed play. The timestamp read July 11, 10:43 p.m. Mark walked through the lobby wearing his brown jacket, the same one he died in. He looked nervous, glancing around before heading toward the elevator. A minute later, Melissa appeared. Sunglasses at night hair tied up, coat pulled tight. She followed him. Frank paused the video. "Room 307, he said quietly. My stomach turned. "Play it," I whispered. He did. The footage jumped ahead an hour. The elevator doors opened again. Mark stepped out alone, looking pale, shaking his head like he'd just heard something terrible. He walked toward the exit. Melissa followed seconds later, calm, collected. She stopped by the front desk, handed the clerk something, and smiled. Frank leaned back, crossing his arms. Hotel manager confirmed she paid cash for an extension. But get this, there's another name on the guest list that night. David Morrison. I froze. My son Frank nodded slowly. Checked in after midnight, left before sunrise. My hands went cold. My own family, all of them tied to that place. He closed the laptop. "Elaine, this isn't about an affair anymore. Something happened there. Something bad. And I don't think Mark's death was an accident." The words hit me like ice water. For a long time, I couldn't speak. The air in Frank's kitchen felt heavy, like even the walls were holding their breath. Finally, I said, "What do we do now?" He gave me a grim smile. "We dig, quietly." We spent the next hour going through everything in that folder, scanning the documents for anything useful. That's when I noticed something odd. A receipt tucked behind the others for a garage repair, dated the day before Mark's death. It listed a service for brake line inspection, paid in cash. But Mark never paid cash for anything. I remembered the officer saying the crash was caused by mechanical failure. My chest tightened. "Frank," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What if someone tampered with his car?" He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we need proof." When I got home, the sky was just starting to lighten. I stood in the driveway staring at Mark's mangled truck. The metal was twisted, the front bumper crushed, but his coffee thermos still sat in the holder like nothing had changed. I ran my fingers along the door handle, still dented from the impact, and whispered, "I'll find out what happened to you, Mark. No matter who I have to go through." Behind me, a car door slammed. I turned. Melissa stood there, arms crossed, watching me. Her voice was low, calm, chilling. "You really should stop looking, Elaine. Curiosity can be dangerous. If someone warned you to stop digging and you suspected they'd killed the man you loved, would you back down? Or dig even deeper, knowing it might destroy everything I didn't tell anyone I was going? Not even Frank." 2 days after Melissa's warning, I found myself driving alone down Route 19, the road slick from an early morning drizzle. The wipers kept a slow, steady rhythm, thump, 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 matching the pulse in my throat. The Grandwood Inn sat just 5 miles past the crash site, a place I'd passed 100 times but never really seen. Now I couldn't look away. It was one of those fancy roadside hotels pretending to be old-fashioned brick facade, brass handles hanging flower baskets at the entrance. To anyone else, it looked charming. To me, it looked haunted. As I parked, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was too bright, my eyes too tired, my grief too obvious. I smoothed my hair, straightened my jacket, and whispered, "Just a widow," picking up her husband's things. Inside, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and something sweeter vanilla, maybe the kind of scent hotels use to cover up old secrets. A young man behind the counter looked up and smiled. "Good morning, ma'am. Checking in." I forced a smile. "No, dear. I'm just here to pick up some belongings. My husband stayed here last month. Mark Morrison." He typed something on the computer. "Room 307, right?" My heart skipped. "Yes," I said softly. He frowned. "Oh, right, the accident. I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am." I nodded. "Thank you." "He left something behind, I think. Maybe a watch or documents. Could you check lost and found?" He disappeared into the back room. I stood perfectly still, scanning the lobby. Everything looked too clean, polished to perfection. A vase of lilies on a side table, a stack of travel brochures, a mirror framed in gold. But behind that beauty was a chill I couldn't name. When the clerk returned, he looked puzzled. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison, we don't have any items under that name." "That's strange," I said, keeping my tone casual. "My daughter-in-law said she was here with him to help with business. You must remember her. Melissa Morrison, blonde hair, expensive perfume." Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by hesitation. Yes, I think so." "She checked in with him briefly, but I'm not really supposed to." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Please, he's dead. Whatever you tell me won't hurt him now." He swallowed. "They looked close. I just assumed they were family." "Family." I repeated the word sour on my tongue. He glanced around, then said quietly, "If you really want to know more, the housekeeping manager, Carla, was on duty that night. Room 37. She saw them." "Carla," I said, memorizing the name. "Is she here today?" He hesitated again, then nodded. "Second floor end of the hall." I thanked him and took the elevator up. My knees ached, but my heart beat fast enough to drown out the pain. The doors opened with a ding, revealing a long hallway lined with beige wallpaper and brass sconces. My shoes made soft clicks on the carpet as I walked. Each step felt heavier than the last. Carla was a woman in her 50s, with tired eyes and a name tag pinned crookedly to her uniform. She looked at me with polite suspicion. "Can I help you?" "I'm Elaine Morrison," I said. "My husband stayed here. I was told you were on duty that night." Her expression softened. "Oh, yes. I remember. He seemed nice. Quiet. Did he seem upset or nervous?" She paused, thinking. "He argued with the lady he was with. Blonde, younger, very well dressed. They were whispering at first, then she raised her voice. Something about money. Then he left alone. She stayed." "Stayed," I repeated. Carla nodded. "Yes. She came down later, maybe an hour after he left. She looked calm, like nothing happened. Asked for a late checkout and paid in cash." The world tilted. "Did anyone else come to the room?" I asked. Carla frowned. "Actually, yes. Another man came that night. I thought it was her husband at first, but now that you mention it..." She squinted. He looked younger. Darker hair seemed tense. "David." I tried to hide my reaction, but my fingers dug into my purse. "Do you remember what time after midnight, I think?" He was gone before morning. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered. As I turned to leave, Carla said something that stopped me cold. Funny thing, though, the next day the woman asked to have that room's carpet cleaned. Twice. I forced a smile, thanked her again, and walked back to the elevator. My legs felt weak. Twice. She had the carpet cleaned twice. I left the hotel before anyone could stop me, the folder pressed to my chest. When I reached my car, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I screamed. The sound swallowed by the rain beginning to fall again. Mark hadn't just died in an accident. Something had happened in that hotel room. Something Melissa wanted erased. As I started the engine, I caught sight of a black SUV in the rearview mirror parked 2 cars behind mine. Its headlights flicked on the second I pulled out. It followed me for 5 miles before turning off. When I got back home from the Grandwood Inn, I was shaking so badly I could barely get my key into the lock. My hands smelled like rain and fear. The house felt smaller than ever, like it was holding its breath with me. Frank was already waiting inside. He must have seen my car pass and come over. That's the kind of man he was. A retired cop with instincts sharper than most detectives still on duty. He took one look at me and said, "You found something, didn't you?" I dropped my purse on the table and nodded. They were there together, Frank, Mark and Melissa, room 307. The housekeeper saw them. Said they argued about money and then she had the carpet cleaned twice. Frank's brows knit together. Twice, yes. And she wasn't alone. David showed up later that night. Frank let out a low whistle. That's not good, Elaine. No, I said, collapsing into the chair. It's not good, it's hell. He sat down across from me, his voice steady but grim. I told you something about this stinks. And if David's involved, it's worse than you think. But we need proof. Hard proof. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and set it on the table. Hotel manager owed me a favor. I've got the surveillance footage from that night. Lobby cameras, parking lot, and hallway. My heart stuttered. You already have it downloaded it this morning. Figured you'd go looking for trouble, so I got ahead of you. We plugged the drive into his laptop, the screen glowing in the dim kitchen light. The sound of rain pattering against the window filled the silence. Frank clicked open the first file. Timestamp 10:37 p.m. There was Mark alive, walking through the Grandwood lobby in his brown jacket. His face was drawn tired. He looked like a man carrying a secret. He pressed the elevator button, glancing behind him every few seconds. At 10:41, Melissa entered. Tight black coat hair pinned neatly. She moved quickly, confident, like she belonged there. She didn't even look around, just straight to the elevator. Frank fast-forwarded. The next clip showed 11:29 p.m. Mark exiting alone. He looked agitated, muttering something, his hands shaking. He brushed past a guest and disappeared toward the parking lot. Then 2 minutes later, Melissa appeared, calm, unbothered. She went to the front desk, said something to the clerk, then turned back toward the hallway. Now watch this, Frank said, opening another file. The hallway camera outside room 307 flickered to life. The timestamp, 12:06 a.m. A tall man appeared at the end of the hall, dark hair, broad shoulders. Even through the grainy footage, I knew that walk. My son, David. He looked nervous, glancing at his phone before knocking twice on the door. Melissa opened it. She stepped aside. He walked in. My stomach twisted. Frank, how long was he in there? He scrubbed forward. 1 hour. Left at 1:08 a.m. Melissa followed right after. Separate elevators. I covered my mouth. They cleaned the carpet the next morning. Frank nodded grimly. You thinking what I'm thinking, that Mark never left that hotel alive. The room fell silent except for the hum of the laptop fan. I stared at the screen, frozen as my son and daughter-in-law disappeared into that room together. Frank rubbed his chin. If the police reopen this case, this footage could raise suspicion, but it's not enough. We need the full recording from inside the parking lot. Maybe catch who left with Mark's car. I can go back, I said instantly. He looked up startled. Elaine, no, that's too risky. If Melissa saw you today, she'll be on guard. She already warned me once, I said, voice trembling but steady. And I ignored her. I'm not stopping now. Frank sighed. You're playing with fire. Then I'll burn, I said quietly. He stared at me for a long time, then nodded. Okay, but you're not going alone this time. The next evening, we returned to Grandwood. Frank pretended to be a private investigator handling a marital case, flashing his old badge to the night clerk. It worked. The young man led us to the back office where the main security monitor was kept. Footage before the crash, Frank asked. The clerk hesitated. I can't show you everything. Frank leaned in, lowering his voice. Then just show us the parking lot. We're not here to cause trouble. He finally relented, pulling up the file from that night. We watched as Mark's car pulled out of the lot at 11:40 p.m. But something was wrong. The headlights flickered dimmer than usual. The car rolled forward slowly, almost uncertainly. Then another figure appeared behind it, someone walking away from the driver's side toward the streetlight. Melissa. She turned once toward the camera before disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, Mark's car was found crushed against a guardrail 5 miles away. Frank paused the video and exhaled. She was the last person to see him alive. I whispered no. They were. He frowned. What do you mean? I pointed to the screen. In the corner reflection of the lobby window, barely visible but unmistakable, stood another shadowed figure, David. Watching. By the time I got home that night, it was past 10. The air outside smelled of wet asphalt and old secrets. I locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and set the laptop on the kitchen table. My hands were trembling again, not from fear this time, from fury. I watched the footage Frank had copied one more time. Mark walking out of room 307. Melissa stepping out moments later. David arriving just after midnight. Then both of them leaving calm, composed, like nothing had happened. I whispered into the empty kitchen, "You murdered him." The old clock ticked on the wall, steady and cruel. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I called David. My voice was steady, almost too calm. "Sweetheart, can you and Melissa come over for dinner tonight? There are some papers I need to discuss about the estate." He hesitated, then said, "Sure, Mom. 6 o'clock. "Perfect," I said. Then I hung up and let the mask drop. The day passed in slow motion. I cooked the same meal Mark loved, roast chicken, garlic, potatoes, his favorite apple pie. The smell filled the house, like nostalgia, bitter and sweet. But there was something different in the air this time, an electric charge, the kind before lightning hits. Frank had offered to be there, but I told him no. This was my fight, my truth. At 5:58, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I wiped my hands, took a deep breath, and pressed record on the tiny camera I'd hidden on the bookshelf across from the table. Melissa walked in first, wearing a cream sweater and that rehearsed smile. David followed, looking tired, eyes heavy. "Smells great, Mom," he said, forcing cheerfulness. "Dinner's ready," I said, smiling back, just like old times. We sat down. For a few minutes we ate in silence, the clinking of forks the only sound in the room. Then I set down my knife and said softly, "I went to the Grand Wood Inn." Melissa's fork froze mid-air. David looked up, frowning. "Why would you go there?" he asked. "To pick up Mark's things," I said, "but it seems there weren't any left, unless you count the receipts and the security footage." Melissa's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. "I think you're confused, Elaine," she said gently. "You shouldn't. I saw you." I cut in. "Both of you." David's voice rose. "Mom, stop. You don't know what you're saying." "Oh, I do," I said. "I saw you walk into that room. After your father left. After you'd both argued about money." The color drained from his face. Melissa reached for his hand under the table, but he pulled away. "You don't understand," he said, voice cracking. "Then help me," I said quietly. "Help me understand why your father died with the brakes cut and your fingerprints on his car keys." The silence that followed was suffocating. Melissa was the first to recover. Her voice was smooth, deliberate. "This is ridiculous. You're grieving Elaine. You're turning your pain into stories." I slammed my hand on the table. "Don't you dare talk to me like I'm senile. I buried my husband while you were cashing in his insurance papers." David flinched. "Mom, it wasn't supposed to happen like that." My heart twisted. "What do you mean, wasn't supposed to happen?" He looked down, hands shaking. "Dad found out. About the hotel. About me and Melissa, helping him move the funds. He threatened to tell the police." Melissa panicked. Melissa shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. David shut up. But it was too late. I leaned forward, voice trembling. "So you did tamper with the car?" "No," David said. "It was just supposed to scare him, to stop him from talking." But then, his voice broke. He lost control in the rain. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor. The room spun. "You killed him." Melissa's voice hardened. "It was an accident. And if you go to the police, it'll ruin what's left of this family." "Family," I hissed. "You don't destroy a family to protect it." For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Melissa stood calm, cold, terrifyingly composed. "You think anyone will believe you, Elaine? A grieving old woman with a theory and a bad video, you have nothing." I smiled slowly. "Actually," I said, glancing toward the bookshelf, "I recorded everything you just said." Melissa's eyes widened. David's chair screeched as he stood. "Mom, don't, I already did," I said, and I sent a copy to Frank. For the first time, Melissa's mask cracked. The calm melted into fury. "You have no idea what you've done." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. David lingered, tears streaking his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant I turned away. You made your choice." When the door closed, I sank into my chair, shaking broken but free. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Frank. They're both gone. Police are on their way. Stay inside. But below that, another message appeared, unknown number. You think it's over? Check your basement. If you just exposed your family's darkest secret and got that message, moments later, would you go downstairs or lock every door and pray it was all over? The message came just as the rain began again, soft at first, then relentless, beating against the windows like knuckles. You think it's over? Check your basement. I read it 3 times, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. The text had no contact name, no number I recognized. Just that sentence taunting me. Frank had told me to stay put. The police were on their way, but they'd been on their way for 30 minutes. The storm outside had swallowed the road in sheets of water. I couldn't sit still any longer. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and made my way toward the basement door. My reflection in the glass window of the back door looked pale, older somehow, like the woman staring back had aged 20 years in one night. The house creaked around me. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant rumble of thunder. When I pulled open the basement door, a rush of cold, damp air hit my face. The smell of oil, mildew, and earth mixed together thick enough to choke on. I clicked on the flashlight and started down the wooden steps. Check your basement. Whoever sent that message, they knew something I didn't. At the bottom, I swept the light across the space. Boxes stacked high, Mark's old tools hanging neatly on the pegboard, a few paint cans in the corner. Everything looked untouched, but then I saw a dark stain near the center of the concrete floor, faint but distinct, circular, about the size of a tire mark. I knelt, brushing my fingers across it. Oil, maybe, but it didn't smell like oil. It smelled like metal. I traced the edge of the stain and felt something odd, a slight ridge beneath the concrete, like a seam. I stood, scanned the wall, and noticed one of Mark's crowbars leaning against the workbench. He'd used it for decades, painting its handle bright red, so he'd never lose it. "All right, Mark," I whispered. "Show me what you didn't want them to find." I wedged the crowbar into the crack and pushed. The first attempt didn't budge. The second made a faint groan. The third, the slab lifted an inch, then another. Beneath it, I saw the outline of a small metal hatch. My pulse quickened. I crouched, pried the hatch open, and shined the flashlight down. A metal box sat inside, locked with a simple latch. The kind of box you'd hide money or papers in, or secrets. I pulled it out, my hands slick with sweat. The box was heavy, colder than it should have been. I flipped the latch open. Inside were 3 things: a USB drive labeled Crimson Project, a set of printed emails, some from Mark's account, others from a contact simply named M, a small sealed envelope with my name written across it in Mark's handwriting. My throat tightened. I tore open the envelope first. Inside was a note, short and hurried. "Elaine, if you're reading this, they know. It wasn't just money, it's what they were moving through the company. I found proof. Keep this safe and trust only Frank. The rest, is on that drive. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I could fix it. I was wrong. Mark." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. It wasn't just money. I looked at the emails next. The first few were harmless invoices, transfers, consulting details. Then I saw one with the subject line, "Shipment Confirmed, Room 307. The sender, Melissa, @dunhillcorp.com. My stomach dropped. Dunhill Corp, the company David worked for, the company that had suddenly offered Mark contract work before his death. Another email read, "Payment will be in full once the shipment clears customs. Don't leave traces. M&D will handle logistics. M&D, Melissa, and David." They weren't just having an affair. They were laundering money, and Mark, my Mark, had found out. I was still staring at the emails when I heard a noise behind me, a soft creak, the kind of sound wood makes when someone steps on it upstairs. "Frank," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The house was silent again. Then thump. Another step. Closer to the basement door. I turned off the flashlight and crouched behind the workbench, heart pounding. The floorboards groaned above me, slow and deliberate. A shadow flickered under the crack of the door. The knob turned. I held my breath, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The door opened halfway. A faint beam of light slid down the stairs. Elaine. It was Melissa's voice. Calm. Too calm. Frank told me you found something. Why don't you come upstairs and we can talk about it? I didn't move. You don't have to be afraid, she continued softly. After all, we're family. I stayed crouched in the dark, the box pressed against my chest, every nerve in my body screaming. Then her voice sharpened, cutting through the air like glass. You shouldn't have opened that box. The basement light clicked off. Darkness swallowed everything. The light snapped off, and for a moment I couldn't even hear myself breathe. Just the thud of my heartbeat and the whisper of rain outside slipping through the cracks of the old house. Elaine, Melissa said again from the top of the stairs, her tone low, almost gentle. You're scaring me. Come up. Let's talk. I gripped the flashlight so tightly my knuckles went white. I wanted to believe she was bluffing, that she didn't know what I'd found, but her voice carried something else beneath the calm. A tremor. A threat. The old wooden steps creaked under her weight as she took one careful step down, then another. Mark wasn't supposed to find out, she said quietly. He wasn't supposed to get hurt. But he didn't listen. He always thought he was smarter than everyone else. My throat tightened. She was confessing just like that. I crouched lower behind the workbench, my phone in my other hand, silently tapping record. Her voice grew sharper. You think you can destroy everything he built by poking around in his mess? You have no idea what you're holding, Elaine. That drive doesn't just expose me or David. It exposes people who won't hesitate to make you disappear. She reached the last step. My pulse thundered in my ears. Put it down, she said. Walk away. Pretend you never saw it. I forced my voice to stay steady. That's what you told Mark, isn't it? The flashlight flicked on in my hand, the beam landing square on her face. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't look like the polished daughter-in-law who smiled at funerals anymore. She looked like something cornered. He left me no choice, she hissed. He was going to the police. David panicked in the car. She stopped herself, biting her lip. I stepped forward. So you cut his brakes. Her silence was louder than thunder. Did my son help you? I whispered. Melissa took a slow breath. David did what he had to. We both did. You don't know what kind of money was involved, what kind of people were watching. It wasn't supposed to end like this. I raised the phone so she could see the red blinking dot on the screen. You just told me everything. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. She lunged. The phone flew from my hand, clattering across the floor. The flashlight beam jerked wildly, painting the walls with frantic shadows. We struggled, her perfume thick, suffocating her hands cold and strong. I shoved her back, but she caught my arm, sending us both crashing into the workbench. Tools fell clanging like gunshots. The metal box hit the floor, spilling papers everywhere. Melissa kicked it toward the stairs. You don't understand, Elaine. If that drive gets out, they'll kill all of us. Then maybe they should start with you, I spat. Her eyes went wild. She grabbed the crowbar, Mark's crowbar, the one I'd used to open the hatch, and swung it toward me. I ducked just in time. The sound cracked through the air, sparks flying as metal hit concrete. Somewhere above, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Headlights flashed through the basement window. Tires screeched. Melissa froze, breath heaving. Then Frank's voice bellowed from upstairs, Elaine, "You down there!" Melissa's eyes widened. For a split second, I saw the decision form in her mind. She turned bolting for the stairs, the crowbar clattering from her hand. I snatched the box and the USB drive, pressing them tight against my chest. "Frank," I shouted. "She's coming up." By the time we reached the living room, Melissa was already at the front door. Frank grabbed her arm, but she twisted free, darting into the rain. His flashlight beam caught her for a moment, soaked hair, wild eyes, bare feet, slapping the pavement. Then she was gone, swallowed by the dark. Frank turned to me, panting. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, holding up the drive. She admitted it. "It's all on here." He looked from me to the open basement door where the faint smell of gasoline now drifted up. His expression changed. "Elaine, did you spill anything down there?" "No," I said slowly. His eyes went wide. "We need to go. Now." Before I could ask why, a low whoosh echoed from below, followed by a bright flash of light. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning chemicals. Frank grabbed my arm. They rigged it. We stumbled out the back door as the basement erupted. The windows shattered outward, a roar of heat and glass. Flames licked the rain smoke, curling into the stormy night. We collapsed onto the wet grass, coughing, gasping, the orange glow reflecting off the puddles around us. My house, my entire life burned. Frank steadied me, voice hoarse. "We have to move. If she's desperate enough to torch the place, she's not done." I looked down at my trembling hands, the USB drive clenched between my fingers. The label, barely visible through soot, still read, Crimson Project. Somewhere out on the road, through the roar of the fire and the sirens beginning to rise, I thought I heard the faint sound of a car door slam. Melissa, running again. But this time, she wouldn't get far. If you had proof that your family destroyed everything and your only home just went up in flames, would you hand it to the police or use it to make them finally pay? By dawn, the rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with smoke and the sharp sting of burnt wood. My home was nothing but a blackened skeleton. The fire trucks were still there, lights flashing red and white across what used to be my front porch. I stood in the wet grass, wrapped in a blanket, watching the last ember die. My fingers still ached from clutching the USB drive all night, the only thing that had survived. Frank was beside me, his flannel shirt soaked through his expression, carved from stone. "They'll say it was an accident," he muttered. "Electrical short faulty wiring, classic cover-up." I looked at him, voice hoarse. "Then we won't give them that chance." He turned toward me. "You're thinking revenge, Elaine." "Don't. Let the police handle it." I shook my head. "The police already had their chance when Mark died. They called it an accident. They didn't even test the brakes." Frank sighed. "So what's your plan?" I held up the drive. "This." Back at his house, we sat in his office, surrounded by old case files and dust. Frank plugged the USB into his computer and a folder popped up, dozens of documents, names and coded ledgers. He scrolled through, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just laundering, Elaine. This is corporate-level corruption. Offshore accounts, shell companies, millions moved under fake consulting fees." I stared at the screen. "Mark found this. That's why they silenced him." Frank nodded slowly. "And now you have proof that Melissa and David were involved." "Not just them," I said, pointing to one of the files labeled Crimson Contract Signatories. 3 initials were listed at the bottom, MM, DM, and RL. "Who's RL?" I asked. Frank clicked deeper. The name appeared in full: Robert Langford, CEO of Dunhill Corp. He let out a low whistle. "Your son and daughter-in-law were working directly with Langford. That's the man the feds have been circling for months. If this drive gets to the right hands, it's not just your justice, it's a federal case." I leaned forward. "Then we take it to them. Not the local cops. The FBI." Frank hesitated. "Elaine, once we do that, there's no going back. Melissa will run. David might too. You'll be burning every bridge left." I looked him straight in the eyes. "They burned my house. I'm just lighting the truth." He cracked a small smile. "You sound like the cop I used to be." We spent the next 2 hours creating copies, one for me, one for Frank, and one encrypted file uploaded to a secure drive. He printed screenshots, labeled them, sealed them in envelopes. He worked methodically, like the detective he'd once been, while I sat in silence, the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair. When we were done, he leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "I'll make a call. An old friend at the bureau. He owes me." I nodded. "And I'll make mine." Frank frowned. "Who are you calling?" I met his gaze. "My son." He looked alarmed. "Elaine, don't." But I was already dialing. When David answered, his voice was strained. "Mom, are you okay? I heard about the fire." "Don't," I interrupted. "We both know it wasn't an accident. Meet me tonight, at the old diner, 8 o'clock. He hesitated. "Why?" "So you can tell me the truth," I said softly, "or I'll make sure the FBI does it for you." The old diner sat on the edge of town, the kind that hadn't changed since the 70s, flickering neon sign, chrome booths, the smell of burnt coffee, and old secrets. It was the place where Mark and I used to eat pie on Sunday nights, long before Betrayal became a second language in our family. I got there early. Frank insisted on parking across the street, pretending to read a newspaper, but keeping one hand near the old service pistol he still carried, just in case. I chose the corner booth by the window facing the parking lot. My reflection stared back at me, and the glass hair pulled tight, dark circles under my eyes, but there was a fire there now. A quiet, controlled fire. At exactly 8:07, David walked in. He looked smaller somehow, not the confident man who used to walk into a room like he owned it. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, guilt hanging off him like a shadow he couldn't shake. "Mom," he said softly, "you shouldn't be here." "Sit down," I said. He slid into the booth across from me. The waitress came by, poured us both coffee without asking, and left us in silence. The smell of stale sugar filled the air. I pushed the small flash drive across the table. "You know what this is?" He stared at it but didn't touch it. "You don't understand, Mom. I didn't want any of this." "Then explain it," I said. "Explain why you were at the hotel the night your father died. Why you helped Melissa cover it up. Why you stood there and watched her walk out alive while he didn't." He looked like he might break. His fingers trembled around the coffee mug. Dad found out about the transfers. He threatened to expose everything. Melissa said she'd fix it. Just talk to him. Calm him down. I swear that's all I thought it was. But she didn't calm him down, did she? He shook his head. When I got there, she was crying. Said he'd left. Said everything would be okay. I didn't find out about the car until later. She told me it was an accident, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her. You still protecting her? I asked quietly. He looked up, his voice cracking. "She's gone, Mom. I can't protect her now." I took a breath, steadying myself. "Then help me do the right thing. I already talked to Frank. He's meeting an FBI contact in the morning. If you cooperate, they'll listen. They'll know you tried to stop her." He looked terrified. "They'll destroy me." "They already did," I said. "You just haven't realized it yet." He buried his face in his hands. "What do you want from me?" "Your confession," I said, "right here. Now." He stared at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Fine." I pulled out my phone, hit record, and set it between us. He began to talk. Every word trembled, the transfers, the meetings, the threats from Dunhill Melissa's panic, the plan to scare Mark that went too far. By the end, his voice was barely a whisper. "I never meant to kill him," he said. "I just wanted to protect her." The doorbell jingled. Frank stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits entered, quietly flashing badges. David turned pale. "You called them." I nodded. "You had your chance to do the right thing. Now it's theirs." The agents approached calmly. One said, "David Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice." As they cuffed him, he looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Mom." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "So am I." Frank placed a hand on my shoulder as they led my son away. "You did what had to be done," he said quietly. I looked out the diner window, rain streaking down the glass, the red and blue lights flashing against the puddles outside. I'd lost my husband. Now I'd lost my son. But for the first time in months, the air felt clear. If you were me, and justice meant watching your own child be taken away in handcuffs, would you still believe you'd done the right thing? I thought it was finally over. David was in custody. Melissa was on the run, and the FBI had everything: the drive, the confession, the proof. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. No nightmares, no sudden jolts awake to the echo of brakes screaming in the rain. But peace has a strange way of turning into silence, and silence always hides something. 3 days later, I got a call from Agent Walker, the man who had taken David away. His voice was clipped businesslike. "Mrs. Morrison, we've reviewed the files from the USB you provided. There's something you need to see." He asked me to come to the field office the next morning. When I arrived, he didn't waste time with small talk. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, emails, wire transfers, contracts, but one detail made my blood run cold. The signature at the bottom of several documents wasn't Melissa's. It was mine. "That's impossible," I whispered. Walker nodded. That's what we thought too. But these documents were digitally signed using your credentials, your name, your authorization key, and your bank account as the backup beneficiary. I felt the room spin. You think I was involved? He didn't answer directly. It appears someone used your identity to legitimize several of the transactions. Whoever it was had access to your personal data, social security bank details, even your old password recovery email. My mind went blank. Mark and I had shared everything: passwords, banking accounts, documents. Could he have? No, he wouldn't. Walker closed the folder. We're pursuing multiple leads. One of them points to a remote access login created before your husband's death from his home computer. I stared at him, my voice barely audible. You're saying Mark was involved? Walker's expression softened. We're not saying that, ma'am, but the data suggests he might have known more than he let on. I left the office numb. Rain started falling again, thin and cold, needling against my face as I stepped into the parking lot. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, staring at my trembling hands on the wheel. Mark's note had said I thought I could fix it. I was wrong. Had he been trying to fix his own mistake? When I got home, the house smelled like smoke and rain and regret. I opened what little I'd salvaged from the fire: old letters, photographs, his favorite fountain pen. That's when I found it tucked between 2 pages of our old mortgage file, a flash drive identical to the first. No label, just a faint red scratch across the casing. I hesitated. My heart said leave it alone. But my curiosity, that stubborn, relentless thing, had already destroyed too much to stop now. I plugged it into my laptop. A video file appeared for Elaine. I clicked play. The screen flickered. Then Mark's face filled the frame, tired, unshaven, sitting in his truck. Rain streaked the window behind him. His voice trembled. Elaine, if you're watching this... I didn't die by accident, but I wasn't innocent either. He took a breath, glancing away from the camera. I found out about the money, what Melissa and David were doing, but I wasn't supposed to, because I helped start it. I froze. I thought it was harmless, just shifting numbers for a client, some side work. Then it got bigger, dirtier. When I tried to back out, they threatened you. So I played along, pretending I could undo it. That's why I met Melissa that night, to hand her the evidence she demanded. His eyes filled with tears. I thought she'd let me walk away. I was wrong. The video ended. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the rain tap against the window. My husband had been both victim and accomplice. The man I'd loved for 43 years hadn't just been betrayed. He'd helped build the lie. If you discovered your loved one was both the cause and the casualty of your suffering, would it make forgiveness easier or impossible? The following week felt like living inside someone else's story, a story that had finally reached its ending but left me unsure whether to feel relief or ruin. David faced charges that would follow him for life. Melissa was caught 2 states away using a fake passport. The FBI told me the case against Dunhill Corp. had cracked wide open billions in hidden assets, dozens of arrests. Justice, they called it. But justice doesn't feel like victory when your family lies in pieces on the floor. I spent long hours sitting on the porch of Frank's house staring at the woods across the road where smoke still blackened the trees. Mark's second flash drive sat in my pocket like a weight I couldn't put down. His confession, his regret, his warning, all tangled together. Frank joined me one evening with 2 mugs of coffee. "You did what you had to," he said. I nodded, but my voice was low, and yet I lost everyone. He looked out toward the fading sunset. "Sometimes the truth doesn't save people, Elaine. It just stops the bleeding." His words hung there, soft but steady. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to cry, not the angry, shaking kind, but quiet tears that felt like letting go. Mark wasn't the man I thought he was. David wasn't the son I raised. Melissa wasn't the daughter I hoped for. But somewhere beneath all that betrayal, I found something I hadn't expected: the strength to face the truth alone. And maybe that was the point. Sometimes the only way to survive the fire is to become the one who walks out of it still standing. A month later, I started rebuilding what was left of my home. New walls, new paint, new beginnings, or at least that's what I told myself. But when the contractors dug through the rubble of the basement, they found something I hadn't expected, a small metal case buried deeper than the first. Inside was a single item, a thin, rusted key, and a note in Mark's handwriting. Crimson wasn't the end. Look for the locker Grandwood Station 14B. My hands shook as I held the key, the world narrowing to that one line. I thought the story was over, that justice had already been served, but Mark's voice, even from the grave, had just reopened a door I didn't know existed. I looked toward the horizon and whispered, "What did you leave behind this time?" If you found that key, would you dare turn it? So that's where my story ends. Or maybe where it begins again with a rusted key, a burned house, and more questions than answers. I don't know what's waiting in locker 14B at Grandwood Station, but something tells me Mark's secrets didn't die with him. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about truth, even when that truth breaks you apart. I learned that love, trust, and blood can all betray you, but courage never will. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do if you found a key like that from someone you thought you'd buried for good? Would you walk away or open the door and face whatever's behind it? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of my story, because this isn't over yet.